Hey everybody, today we're taking a look at the cell boundaries and what happens at the outside of a cell. Now, if we consider a single cell like this paramecium here, the cell membrane of that paramecium is its first line of defense and its first layer of interaction with the world around it. The cell membrane really is how an organism responds initially to its environment. Remember, responding to its environment is one of our primary characteristics of living things. So that cell membrane is made of what we call a phospholipid bilayer. And that's just two layers of phospholipids with their tailed sections facing one another. So that phospholipid is made up of a hydrophilic head and hydrophobic tails. What do those words mean? Hydrophilic, hydrophobic. You may have heard of phobias before, and a phobia is just something that you fear. So hydrophobic is water fearing, and hydrophilic is water loving. I would strongly recommend that you draw a diagram like this in your notes. Okay, showing the phospholipid bilayer, showing protein channels. We'll get to those a little bit later. Okay, but really showing that phospholipid structure and the protein channels, which is where larger molecules can pass. So what is the function of the cell membrane or cell wall? Okay, obviously the cell membrane is involved with many things like regulating what goes in and out. It provides protection and support. It's made of this phospholipid bilayer structure. And all cells have a cell membrane. All living things are made of cells. All cells have a cell membrane. So cell membrane seems to be kind of a basic function and necessity of living things. The cell wall, to contrast, only plants, algae, fungi, and most prokaryotes have a cell wall. It's kind of like an external skeleton, just providing protection and support. It's very, very porous. So it kind of lets just anything through. That membrane is that security, that gatekeeper, letting some things pass and keeping other things out. So we need to describe, for the rest of this, we need to describe a few chemistry terms that it's probably been a while since you covered. First is a solution. That's a mixture of two or more substances. Solute is the substance that is dissolved in a solution. The solvent is the substance doing the dissolving. And concentration is the mass of a solute in a given volume of solution. Okay. If, for example, we had 40 grams of Kool-Aid in 2 liters of water, that's a pretty heavy mix, trust me, you would calculate that concentration to be 20 grams per liter. Okay. Now, those terms are important because all cells live in aquatic environment. All living things live in a liquid environment. Even ourselves, we are just giant sacks of fluid that hold our cells in place. So this is a big part of why water is so important to all living things. Okay, the cell membranes can regulate the movement of dissolved molecules from one side of the membrane to the other. Okay, so diffusion is the first transport type that we're going to cover. And diffusion is just a movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to low concentration. It's like if I put a drop of food coloring in a glass of water. Initially, all of that food coloring is contained in a single drop. Give it time, eventually that food coloring dropped in can disperse through the beaker or glass, whatever, and create one homogeneous color. All of this happens in the cytoplasm and in the environment around the cell. Okay? In any solution, particles move randomly, and that means that this movement from high concentration to low concentration is natural and requires no excess energy. It's free movement, and it's called diffusion. Okay, it's super easy, requires no energy. It's just like if you rolled a boulder up a hill. And that boulder, you could roll back down the hill without adding any energy to that boulder, just with a little nudge. It requires very little, if any, energy. So the diffusion across a membrane, because our cell membranes are semi-permeable, if we had a system that looked like this and that cell membrane was permeable to the blue dots, note that there are fewer dots on the top or on the bottom than on the top. Okay, so what would we expect to happen? Because that diffusion happens naturally with free energy, the particles are already moving, eventually we would expect something called equilibrium to occur. Equilibrium is just when the concentrations of a solute are the same throughout a system, top, bottom in this case, or inside and outside. Okay, remember these particles are always moving. It's just what particles do in a fluid environment. So keep that in mind. They're still moving all the time. Osmosis is specifically a special type of diffusion. It's the diffusion of water from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration across a cell membrane. It goes until equilibrium is reached. And sometimes that equilibrium is not entirely reachable, but the system will continue to try to reach that equilibrium. Osmosis, again, is a type of diffusion, so it does not require energy. It happens freely across the cell membrane. Water molecules move freely across your cell membrane. Think about this. If the concentration of sugar is higher outside a cell than inside, where would we expect the water to move to? Pause here if you need to. Think about that. Concentration of sugar is higher outside than inside. Where would the water move? Now, in a system like that, the water would move out of the cell towards that higher concentration of sugar, or really towards the lower concentration of water. The water moves from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So, here are some key terms to help us define those scenarios. Isotonic means when the concentration of two solutions is the same, both inside and outside the cell, for example. Now, again, those particles are always moving. The water is moving back and forth, but it happens randomly and in the same net direction. Okay, or a zero net direction, I guess. Just as much in as out. Hypertonic solutions, when the solution that the cell is in has more stuff in it, that's hypertonic. That's the solution with the greater concentration of solutes. In those solutions, if we have a cell in a hypertonic solution, the water will escape the cell and shrink. If we have a cell in a hypotonic solution, okay, that means that the solution that the cell is in has lower concentrations of solutes, and therefore water will rush into the cell. maybe even eventually causing the cell to burst. So that was diffusion. But what if the molecules are too large to diffuse across the membrane? Well, our cell membranes have a solution for that, and those are called protein channels and carrier proteins. These substances, these proteins embedded in the cell membrane, allow larger molecules to pass. Protein channel allows things to pass kind of freely, large things, and a carrier protein can open and close. Again, we're moving from areas of high concentration to low concentration. So still, no energy is required. This is a boulder rolling down a hill, high to low. So what type of large molecules might a cell need to take in? Now, active transport, I'm going to make a separate video for, and I'll post that in the very near future. Have a great day.